So I've been talking a lot about Star Wars lately because of the Rise of Skywalker trailer, and now we're officially on the road to Rise of Skywalker. You know, it's only a couple of months away. Many people already have their tickets for the film. Some are not going to go see it, but with the final trailer coming out, it's once again being discussed. And I wanted to do a little bit of self-reflection on this sequel trilogy. I've done a lot of videos about this sequel trilogy, and I've talked about how at the end of the day, no matter what happens, even if Rise of Skywalker does satisfy some audiences, I feel like the sequel trilogy is going to end up being an overall failure, right? Overall, because from what I've understood, and what I mean by that is not a financial failure, okay? I've talked about this in the past. I'm talking about the fact that Rise of Skywalker has to satisfy the people who love Last Jedi and those who hate it. And the problem is those are very different people. It's going to be a very big challenge for J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio to write a movie that can satisfy everyone. And Disney wants them to satisfy everyone, but that's impossible because the damage may have already been done. You know, when it comes to Luke Skywalker's character, unless they have some very creative writing, which I think they could do. I might do a video on what I would do to fix Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. They might be able to possibly fix some of the problems with Luke's character in Last Jedi, which seems to be a big problem for a lot of fans. But other than that, it's going to be hard to fix, if not impossible. You see, the way Luke Skywalker was portrayed in that movie was, I think, the main issue with that movie. I mean, there's other problems with the film as well, but I think that was one where Star Wars fans that had 40 years of equity with Luke Skywalker felt betrayed by the direction that Disney Star Wars went in. And this trilogy really was never meant to be focused on Luke Skywalker or the old cast, but it's almost like Disney's playing games with the Star Wars fans, and they are. I mean, they're definitely doing it because they keep throwing the nostalgia bombs at us. The Millennium Falcon, Luke, Han, and Leia, you know, C-3PO and R2. They've been throwing all these things at us, you know, Palpatine now for the new one, since they bought the property, because their whole idea was the prequels got a lot of crap, so let's stay away from the prequels. Now people seem to be appreciating the prequels more, which I think is kind of funny. And, you know, to me, this trilogy, I think the main problem they have, which we've talked about before, is their lack of direction. They had no real direction. They didn't have a real understanding of the fandom, because the fandom didn't want to see this Luke Skywalker. They wanted to see Luke have one more romp, sort of like what Harrison Ford got in Force Awakens. You know, whether or not you like or dislike Force Awakens, you can't deny they gave Han Solo one last big adventure, and if you're a fan of Star Wars, you had to appreciate that, right? I feel like most people do. Luke didn't get that adventure, you know, and I think people wanted that. And obviously with Leia, you know, she got to do some things in these movies, mostly being a general, which is what she's good at. But unfortunately, Carrie Fisher passed away for real, and there's nothing you can do about that. Like, that's not Disney's fault, yo. That is an unfortunate event that sucks. But when I think about Rise of Skywalker and I think about how they could end this thing, who they could satisfy, I just don't know. Maybe with the exception of the really little kids, you know, the ones that just sort of watch these movies for fun, and, you know, they don't really dissect the movies. And, you know, you're a kid. You'll watch anything that has cool fights and spaceships. So, you know, except them, I'm trying to wonder who the film will satisfy as far as, you know, people who have been fans of Star Wars. Because it's hard. You know, people are asking the question, can J.J. Abrams stick the landing? And he's going to have to figure out a way to make Rey, who is the main character of this saga, and Kylo Ren, of course, but really Rey is the main protagonist. They have to figure out a way to make her an interesting and likable character more than they've already done. I felt like in Force Awakens they did a great job early in the film showing how she's alone, living in the Walker. There was really good stuff in that movie that J.J. Abrams came up with to kind of showcase her loneliness and her desire for an adventure. And I feel like that felt nice. Like, seeing that movie, it was good. It reminded us of Luke Skywalker because really, you know, people have said it, Force Awakens is very similar, very, very similar to the original Star Wars movie. With Rise of Skywalker, though, I feel like because of the lack of real development for Rey in Last Jedi, she's not that interesting. You know, and then with Kylo Ren probably got the most development in Last Jedi, but yet he's still going to play second fiddle, because think about it sort of like a ladder system, okay? If Rey's the main good guy, right, then the main bad guy should theoretically be Kylo Ren. However, with Palpatine coming back, it looks like he's going to be the main bad guy. And if Kylo Ren turns good, he's going to be the number 2 good guy because Rey's the main good guy. So Kylo Ren is sort of like Vegeta in Dragon Ball, if you follow that franchise, because he's always number 2. And to me, it's kind of unfair because Kylo Ren's the most interesting character of the new Disney Star Wars that they've written. There hasn't been a character, in my opinion, they have come up with who is more interesting than Kylo Ren. He's the inverse of Anakin. He wants to be evil. The good is calling to him, which is the opposite of what happened to Anakin in the prequels, and he's always fighting with himself to see what he wants to do. At one point, he wanted to be the next Vader, and then in Episode 8, when he's turned on Snoke, he now surpassed Vader to become the absolute supreme leader of the First Order, who is presumably almost fully in control of the galaxy. Now, we don't know the state of the galaxy between 8 and 9 yet, but the resistance is still there. So I'm guessing that the battle's not over yet, but you would think that by now, based on sheer numbers, the First Order would have already gained control. Plus, in the crawl for Episode 8, it says the First Order reigns. That's the first word you see. But again, we've talked about it. There's no direction in these movies. They don't have any synergy. There's no synergy between the creative ideas of J.J. Abrams and the creative ideas of Rian Johnson and everybody else involved. Who even knows what the story group has been saying? Also, when it comes to closing off the saga, the final battle in this movie has to be something that is completely intense. Because when you think about the last 2 trilogies, right? Just sit down and think about this, right? With Return of the Jedi, we're going to go in order by release. The big finale was a huge battle. You had the fight on Endor, the fight in space, which is my favorite space battle in all of Star Wars, with Lando and the Falcon. You've got that, all that craziness going on. You got tons of Star Destroyers there. You know, the shield is really, you know, trying to knock down the shield, and they lied about it being operational. Then you've got the throne room scene with Palpatine, Vader, and Luke, the most emotional part of the movie. And, of course, the big finale with Anakin being redeemed finally and, of course, dying the hero's death, right? Fantastic ending. Maybe one of the best endings to any saga ever. Maybe the best, right? Because it's just perfect. Say what you want about Jedi as a movie. The ending is incredible. Very moving. And of course, when you see the ghosts of them there, it's even more touching. The previous Jedi with Luke being the last one. And then you've got Revenge of the Sith, which what they did there was also hit you emotionally because, and of course, spoilers, I'm sure if you haven't seen these movies by now, what are you doing here? Right? With Revenge of the Sith, what Lucas decided to do was, instead of doing this big space battle at the end, he put it at the beginning of the movie. You know, and I don't think that battle was really as good as the one in Jedi. You know, but you know, we have with Revenge of the Sith much more sizzle than steak, I feel, you know, for most of the movie. Lots of fights. We've got 5 lightsaber duels in the film. We've got Anakin going to the dark side. Then we have the big finale, which is like how long was that last fight? Like 8 minutes, I think it was, between Anakin and Obi-Wan in this giant lava planet, right? And it's just, when that's over with, this crazy battle, you've got, you know, that montage at the end of the movie that shows, you know, Padme giving birth, which I think, and I've said this before, Revenge of the Sith's biggest problem is that it's very rushed. They crammed way too much into that movie. There's a lot of stuff going on. But you've got Padme giving birth. You've got Luke going off to, you know, Tatooine, baby Luke. You know, Obi-Wan, Yoda going into exile. You've got Anakin becoming Darth Vader, and you've got the construction of the first Death Star. That's the last few scenes of the film. And, of course, the Padme funeral. So there's just emotion. For this movie, for the end of this saga, you have to be able to kind of capture a lot of that and satisfy the audience. He's going to have to. So the final battle in Rise of Skywalker has to be so freaking insane. We have to, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. I know some people are going to think this is shallow, but they're going to have to give us more ships, more freaking, you know, different kinds of ships, more epic space battles, maybe a ground battle somewhere. And you don't have to have 15,000 lightsaber duels in the film, but the ones that are in the movie have to be at least close to being prequel quality. Obviously, the prequel trilogy had more choreographed lightsaber duels. The original trilogy had more emotional ones. The OT has better lightsaber duels as far as emotion goes, but the prequel, Duel of the Fates, just has really impressive, stuff. The Jedi at their peak and whatnot. That was George Lucas's vision. Here, with how powerful Rey and Kylo are, we need to see something like Rey and Kylo using the Force to like move ships around. Like heavy duty stuff, like 2003 Clone Wars stuff. Because remember, Vader in A New Hope talks about the Death Star and says that the ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force. So we need to see the Force, yo. If Palpatine's in there doing some stuff, there's some spoilers out for some of the stuff he does, which sounds great, but we need to see some new Force powers, maybe like some of the stuff from the video games. We need to see something that's so visually intense that we walk out of there satisfied. And emotionally, it's going to be very hard to end this saga right because, and this is the truth, guys, we're not as invested in Rey, Poe, Finn as we were Luke, Han, and Leia. We're just not. So Finn already did his arc. He got the girl, Rose Tico. Poe Dameron, is the leader of the Resistance. Leia seems to be stepping down with Poe kind of becoming the leader. That's my guess. They're going to do with the character. Then, of course, Rey will be the real Last Jedi. You know what I mean? She's the last one. And we don't have that connection to Rey anymore. We just don't. And again, I don't know how it's going to play out. Like I said, there's spoilers out, but not every piece of dialogue's been revealed. And there's a lot of stuff missing from what happens. But there's got to be something in this movie where when we walk out of the theater, we don't have to be in tears or anything like that, but we have to be sort of mourning the end of Star Wars. That's what JJ has to do. Like, we have to be happy that we saw something epic, but also be sad that it's over. Because the Skywalker saga is done. There's going to be more movies, but this is the Skywalker saga, the main saga. I just don't know if they can pull that off because of how much damage has been done already. I do not know. It's going to be very difficult for them to pull that off. And I'm not saying they won't pull it off. I'm saying I don't envy J.J. Abrams. You know what I'm saying? It's just hard to put a cap on a franchise this big. With George Lucas, and this is something you got to think about, he kind of got lucky in a way because he already ended the saga in 83 with Return of the Jedi. Revenge of the Sith just had sort of the story of Vader's end, or Anakin's end becoming Vader. And he already had the equity of the previous 5 movies because that was the 6th movie at the time. So we already had a connection to Vader and we knew what his ultimate outcome was in Jedi. So seeing what happened in that movie was tragic, even though Hayden was probably not the best actor in some of the lines in that movie. I have nothing against Hayden Christensen, but his acting was not great, at all. In most of the movie, and I think that we did have an emotional connection to Padme. I think that Lucas did a great job of getting us to kind of love her as a character, in my opinion, but we don't really have that with Finn or Poe. I just don't see that many people fanboying out over Finn and Poe, and it's crazy because the story of Finn could have been a great one. He was in the First Order and he's going to help take it down. So to me, I think it probably would have been better if they would have kept Phasma alive and had Finn beat her in this movie and not in the previous one. They kind of blew their load in the previous one, and now what's left for the guy? You know what I mean? Unless he dies, which I don't think he does, but I don't know. The spoilers are out, but not everything is revealed in that, so I don't know. I have no idea, but it's just, there's a lot of things that have to be wrapped up here, and I don't know. I just feel like, are we going to walk out of that theater satisfied? Are we going to say this was a great ending to the saga? Or are we going to say, what, maybe the previous 2 movies weren't that great, but this one was? Or are we going to walk out and say, damn, I really wish 7 and 8 were better because 9 had potential? Or are we going to say, what, that was good, but it could have been great? I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to be mostly like, I don't think it's going to be a terrible movie, honestly. I think there's going to be a lot of story problems that I've discussed before. I think there'll be some things that'll be worth watching and worth enjoying, but I don't know, man. This is a tough one. Very, very tough. Anyways, let me know in the comments, do you think this movie will actually satisfy people? Can it satisfy people? And I mean beyond just action. Will it be a satisfying conclusion to the story? Let me know. Thank you again, and I'll talk to y'all soon.